Hello, I'm Mike from Lanzarote Information and welcome to another edition of the Lanzarote News and Weather Update, together with the usual things we do on these videos. In the middle I'll give you a useful Spanish phrase, and right at the end I'll tell you about 3 things you could be doing on the island in the next 7 days or so if you happen to be here. So let's give you a weather update. Well, the first thing is it's hot. We've had good weather all week, lovely blue skies, the odd white fluffy cloud, and the temperatures have been in the high 20s, in some places in the low 30s. We have a heat warning for this weekend, which will move temperatures up into the mid 30s, particularly in inland areas. And as you can see, I'm inside because it's too hot out there at the moment, and I'm benefiting from the air conditioning in our kitchen. The forecast for the next week or so looks like standard June weather, or we're going into July, of course, next week. July weather for Lanzarote, hot and sunny, and just very pleasant for all of you on holiday. There is a warning of a possible slight kalima on Saturday. A kalima is when Saharan dust gets blown over here from the Sahara Desert, but it's not predicted to be a particularly bad one, and it should disappear as we move into Sunday. Well, without further ado, let's crack on with the news. And the first item I've got for you this week is that Arrecife is going all white. Now, you might remember, those of you who know the island well, that about a year ago or so, Playa Honda, the ayuntamiento for Playa Honda is San Bartolome. San Bartolome ayuntamiento told all the businesses in Playa Honda that they had to go predominantly white and only have black signage. There was a bit of pushback to that at the time, because those of you who've been coming to the island for a few years will know that a lot of those buildings in the industrial estate of Playa Honda that face on to the main road there had sort of multicoloured signs that lit up at night and all kinds of stuff like that. And they complied and they painted their buildings white and they put only black signage up, and it looks really good. It looks so much nicer now than it used to. Well, Arrecife are following suit, and as a town on the island, it's probably the least conventional in that a lot of the buildings, a lot of the apartment blocks are all kinds of different colours. There are some yellow ones, there are some sort of fawn-coloured ones, there's even a couple of green painted buildings. Well, Arrecife City Council have now announced a new municipal ordinance, that's quite hard to say, municipal ordinance, which requires all buildings in the capital to be painted predominantly white and any signage to be black. So expect Arrecife to start looking as classy as Playa Honda does already. Bit of a shocking story this, the number of properties rented or able to rent as holiday homes with a VV letting license has doubled in the last 2 years. The number of them has gone up from 5,198 to 10,368, which is quite a shocking number. Now, I know a lot of people get revved up about, oh, there's too many hotels in Lanzarote. Well, the last hotel that opened was the biggest one on the island, and that has about 1,400 beds. These rental homes that have doubled in the last 2 years have added about 15,000 beds to the overall number of tourist beds available on the island. So it really is an issue here in terms of over-tourism, if that makes sense. But it also means that another 5,000 homes in the last 2 years that exist on the island have been taken out of the market for local people to either buy or rent. So it is an issue. It's something that everyone felt would happen when we knew that the new letting law was coming imminently, and indeed it has. I really don't understand why the Cabildo didn't put a moratorium or a stop on new applications. They didn't do so. It just means it's going to be much harder to start to reduce the number once the new letting law comes in. Now, I often get things wrong, and one of the things I've got wrong in these bulletins over the last few months is that I've been saying that cruise ships, small boutique cruise ships, won't be coming to Playa Blanca until at least 2026, perhaps as far ahead as 2027. And my rationale for that was that the cruise lines tend to plan their itineraries several years ahead. Well, I'm prepared to say when I'm wrong, and I was wrong about that, because we've had news this week from both our Cabildo and the Canarian government that we can expect the first cruise ships to be docking in Playa Blanca this coming winter. Now, they haven't given us any detail on it at all, so we don't know which cruise lines they are. What we do know is that it's only small cruise ships that can dock in Playa Blanca because of the depth of the water and the length of the dock. So we are talking about ships with, some of them only have 100 passengers, others up to a maximum of 500 or 600 passengers. So all the people whinging on social media that this is going to ruin Playa Blanca, it really isn't. I mean, ultimately, even a ship with 500 people on it, most of them will either take a tour, which will involve a bus that will take them to Tim and Fire or one of the other attractions on the island. Some will hire a car and go travelling out on their own for the day. You might perhaps have an extra 100 people on the street in Playa Blanca who just decide to wander ashore and have a wander around. You really aren't going to notice that number of people at all. So stop whinging, please. It really is not going to be an issue. A nice story this week. Tallulah Ruby, who is a singer based in London, I think currently, or Brighton, somewhere in the south of the UK, is going to be performing at Glastonbury this weekend. Tallulah will be singing with the band Marabou State on the West Holts stage at Glastonbury. So if you're at Glastonbury now, make sure you go along to the West Holts stage from 10:15 to 23:45. So it's quite a long set. And to have a look at that in the programme, look out for Marabou State. It's Tallulah. The reason I mention it, Tallulah was born in Lanzarote, and obviously she has very, very strong ties here. Her parents, Ben and Zoe, some of you may know, they used to own Cantina Teguise, are still on the island, of course, and Tallulah visits often. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I've known her since she was a tiny little girl. So it's great to see her doing so well and representing Lanzarote in the United Kingdom and on a tour that they're doing all through Europe at the moment. Well done, Tallulah. Next up, we've got the story of Puerto Calero. Now, I know many of you may know this, but some may not. Where the harbour buildings, the marina buildings are built at Puerto Calero, right on the front there, they're very unusual in that it's one of the few places on the island that is actually what we would call a leasehold property. So the marina company that runs the whole place doesn't actually own the land that they're sitting on. And I've known for years that they are coming up for a lease renewal in September of this year, September 2025. And I've always assumed that it's going to be renewed, and of course it is going to be renewed. The renewal was announced this week, and the leasehold is going to be renewed until 2060, so a long, long time ahead, which is great news for the marina company, and they will be investing more money into Puerto Calero. We're talking about an investment of 6.3 million euros, which will give the marina 28 new ordinary berths, 18 special berths for catamarans, and 3 berths for very large yachts, you know, where the super luxury yachts, or super yachts as they're called, are moored on the harbour wall by the gas station there. And they're also going to be increasing the size of the dry dock and the big boat building and repair warehouse at the far end of Puerto Calero. That's going to be extended as well to offer more services for yachts, many of whom are coming here for a refit prior to doing a transatlantic crossing. Now let's do the useful Spanish phrase of the week. And it's one that you'll look at and think is quite complicated when I initially say it and show it on screen, but you'll quickly get the hang of this. And this is for the scenario where you're in a restaurant perhaps, and the waiter has given you the menu, you've had a look at it, you're not quite sure what to order. Perhaps the waiter has told you about the specials of the day that are on that particular day. And what you want to ask is, as we do so often, what would you recommend? And it's certainly something Julie particularly does. She will either ask the waiter or waitress whether they recommend a particular dish, or she will also ask what's the most popular dish on the menu before ordering. So how do you say that in Spanish? What would you recommend? And the answer is ¿qué me recomendaría? ¿Qué me recomendaría? Translating that, it's simply, what would you recommend to me? So try and store that one away and use it next time you're in a restaurant. I find that one particularly useful when you get a list of the special fresh fish of the day that they've got. And quite often they'll say 3 or 4 different dishes, 3 or 4 different fish, I should say, that they've got in fresh that morning. And I will often say, "Que me recomendia?" And I'll perhaps add "Que me recomendia para los dos, para compartir." So what would you recommend for two of us to share? Now, before we finish off with the news and move on to the 3 things you could be doing next week, just a quick question for you really. Do you have questions about Lanzarote that we perhaps haven't covered in our videos? Do let me know with a comment below. I read every single one of them. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Okay, next up we've got a new cycleway that's being built in Puerto del Carmen at a cost of €859,000. Now, if you think of the layout of Puerto del Carmen, imagine looking down on it. You've got the road that runs along the front, the strip. Currently there is a cycleway at the side of that. You've then got the top road, which is the road that runs from the airport to Puerto Calero. But there is also a middle road which doesn't get used very much. It's called the Rambla, and it's the kind of centre road that, like the other 2, will take you from one end of Puerto del Carmen to the other end of the resort. Well, the cycleway is going on that central road, the Medulla, and it will run from one end of the other of Puerto del Carmen alongside that main road. And there will also be a wider and better pedestrian area next to it, but with the cycle lane and the pedestrian area segregated. Personally, I think this is a really good idea because the issue we have at the moment with the cycleway that runs along the strip in Puerto del Carmen is that it really isn't very well segregated from pedestrians, and that makes it perhaps a little scary for pedestrians at times, and as a cyclist it certainly makes it quite difficult for me cycling along there. I have to take it very easy, and hopefully on this main road with a dedicated cycleway I'll be able to get from one end of Carmen to the other much more quickly. And while we're talking about road stuff, there are new smart pedestrian crossings in Costa de Gizeh. The first is already operational. There's another going to follow, and presumably more of them will be done in future. And they're really quite clever. The pedestrian crossings in Costa de Gizeh are a bit of an issue. I think there are too many and they are too close together. But also because of the way vehicles park close to them, as a driver it's quite often difficult to see if there is someone waiting to cross. Well, these new smart crossings will have motion sensors above them, and when there's someone waiting to cross they will send kind of strobing lights across them, so it will alert drivers that there is somebody waiting to cross. Great idea, keep it going, but hey, why not just introduce a zone where cars can't park close to the pedestrian crossing? It would make life much easier for drivers. Now, the Cabildo have launched a new initiative where they are asking for consultancies to come up with a plan to get the message out that Lanzarote should be all about responsible and ethical tourism. Now, as always with these sort of government projects, it's really difficult to dig behind the words they use and understand exactly what they mean. I'm going to share with you what our President Oswaldo Betancourt said at the launch. He said, "We are going to send the message that in Lanzarote we need not just any tourist, but a tourist who loves and enjoys the island." All of this will be communicated throughout the value chain of Lanzarote tourism and also for the resident. We are creating a unique model in the world of ethical and responsible tourism, but above all in the dissemination and making it clear that from before landing, you enter a deeply fragile and beautiful territory that must be preserved and promoted. So the only other thing we know about this new initiative at the moment is that it will be communicated via leaflets on aircraft inbound to the island. There will be billboards at the airport, and tour guides will be trained in how to get this over to people who are on the tours. I can't argue with any of it. I mean, I really would be happy if we could get rid of the disrespectful tourists who are quite happy to swim in the Hamillos del Agua or climb up the protected areas in Timan Fire or deface buildings with spray paint, yes, let's get rid of them. My only issue with this is that those are the kind of people who probably won't even read these leaflets, much less obey what they're asking them to do. But we'll see. I kind of like the initiative, but I'd like to see the whole thing kind of enforced and reiterated in a more effective way. Now, the penultimate piece of news for today, before we move on to the 3 things you could be doing next week, Playa del Reducto in Arrecife has once again achieved its blue flag for this year, cementing the capital's beach as one of the best on the island. And finally, we had the figures through for the average daily spend by tourists on the island. And there was a really interesting thing that came out of this. This was for the first quarter of the year, by the way. The biggest spenders on the island are the people from Scandinavian countries. And the average Scandinavian tourist, so Norway, Sweden, etc., spends around 225 euros per day on the island. The reason that kind of stopped me in my tracks is that there's a big difference. If you look at the other 3 main groups that come here, those from the United Kingdom, from mainland Spain and from Germany, they're all in the sort of 174 to 185 euros range. So they're all within a few percent of each other. But the Scandinavian country people are way, like 18% higher than the next highest one. So there's a big difference there. I don't know why. Maybe they've got more money than the rest of us. But anyway, your spend is very welcome if you're Scandinavian and watching this. When you look at the breakdown a bit further on, around half of that daily spend is spent on accommodation and 7% on transport, which means either taxis or hire cars and things like that. So here are 3 things you could be doing if you're on the island next week. And the first, and those of you who know me well will know that I will be delighted about this, and I am, the English language movie showing at Dayland on Tuesday the 1st of July is F1 the Movie, starring Brad Pitt, of course. Now, I was really surprised at this because normally the English language versions of movies are shown some weeks after their release, but this is really hot off the press. I think the film only premiered a few days ago. So next Tuesday the 1st, Dayland Shopping Centre, the cinema upstairs, tickets are only €6 and you can enjoy F1 the Movie with Brad Pitt. Next up, we've got next Friday, the 4th of July, Independence Day. If you like ska music, get yourselves down to Café La Ola in Puerto del Carmen. Ska music, of course, is things like songs by bands like Madness and Buster Blood Vessel and so on and so forth. We have an absolutely brilliant ska band on the island called the Skatoons, a lot of whom are mates of ours, and they just always give the most amazing energetic performance. So that is on Friday the 4th. It starts at 7:30 at Café La Ola in Puerto del Carmen, and I promise you it'll be a great night. And finally, next Saturday, the 5th at, let me just double check the time, 8 o'clock, there is a jazz performance by the Didi Bridgewater Quartet in Hamillos del Agua. And any event at Hamillos del Agua is always fantastic. The theatre there is so atmospheric and the acoustics are unbelievable. So even if you're not that into jazz, you might want to go along and enjoy this performance by the Didi Bridgewater Quartet. Tickets are €30 if you just want to go for the concert, but I would recommend that you pay €50 and then you get your concert ticket, but you can also hang around afterwards and have a cocktail and something to eat prepared by the excellent team that produce all the food at Hamillos del Agua. So there we go, those are the 3 things I'd recommend for next week. I may well see you at one of them, so do say hello. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We'll be back at the same time next week. And don't forget that we also produce a Tuesday video and a Thursday video. So if you want to stay up to date with all things Lanzarote and perhaps learn something new at each of them, subscribe to our channel. If you've liked this one, please give us a like. It really does make a difference to our reach. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now, everyone. Bye.